The first undeniable indication that something had gone deeply sour was something the executive suites of our corporate headquarters was not the lukewarm, tasteless coffee in the break room or the fact that human resources had quietly postponed my annual performance evaluation 3 separate times. It was the subtle, condescending manner in which our Chief Executive Officer Brad Pierce addressed me during executive board brief presentations. Brad Pierce was 42 years old, equipped with bright bleached teeth, expensive tailored suits, and an overwhelming vocabulary of startup buzzwords that he used to mask a fundamental lack of operational knowledge. My name is Vance Cooper. I am 54 years old. I have spent 14 long, exhaustive years as Director of Enterprise Sales, transforming what was once a chaotic 3-person phone room into the undisputed financial engine of the entire organization. When I was originally brought on board 14 years ago, the company was struggling to manage basic client relationships. I remember sleeping on a folding cot in my corner office during those early years, personally writing lead qualification scripts, cold calling enterprise directors, and mapping out customer growth trajectories. The sales department relied on fragmented spreadsheet documents, outdated paper directories, and a complete absence of structured pipeline tracking metrics. Over 14 years of relentless discipline, I systematically built an elite 8-person sales division. We established standardized lead qualification protocols, developed deep institutional trust with Fortune 500 executives, and consistently exceeded every annual revenue target assigned to us by corporate leadership. Entering the fourth quarter of this past fiscal year, my team single-handedly generated $24 million in projected annual contract value, accounting for precisely 65% of the company's total gross revenue. Brad Pierce had arrived 3 years ago, following the sudden departure of our founding chief executive officer. He brought with him a long trail of failed marketing tech ventures, several expensive executive assistants, and a supreme conviction that legacy sales directors like me were dinosaurs who succeeded despite our methods rather than because of them. He constantly pushed for automated social media marketing campaigns, high-priced branding consultants, and flashy graphic pitch decks, while treating complex multi-million-dollar enterprise software negotiations like fast food drive-through sales. He frequently interrupted my client debriefs to suggest low-tier promotional giveaways, completely failing to understand that corporate vice presidents do not sign 5-year enterprise agreements because they received a branded plastic water bottle or a colorful sticker. Our most recent achievement was securing a flagship enterprise agreement with a national healthcare software conglomerate. That single contract was valued at $5,800,000 over a 4-year service life cycle. It was a deal that major industry competitors like Oracle and Salesforce had aggressively pursued for over 6 months, yet my team closed it through meticulous technical demonstrations, custom software integration architecture, and round-the-clock negotiation calls. Despite these massive figures, Brad Pierce continued to treat me like an over-the-hill legacy manager whose primary contribution was keeping corporate morale steady. He would slap my shoulder at Monday morning breakfasts, make condescending comments about traditional sales tactics, and publicly attribute our quarter-over-quarter growth to broad macro market trends rather than our relentless execution. Furthermore, Brad Pierce had recently introduced an absurd internal performance metric system that prioritized superficial social media engagement scores over closed contract value. He publicly praised junior marketing interns for publishing viral videos, while ignoring the grueling contract reviews executed by my senior representatives. I stood by silently as he reorganized executive seating arrangements, moving my top performers to cramped cubicles near the server room while expanding his own corner suite with custom Italian furniture. Still, I chose to focus strictly on our commercial results, believing that numbers would ultimately speak louder than executive ego. My 8 team members were not reckless corporate cheerleaders who relied on empty motivational speeches. They were seasoned, dedicated professionals who routinely sacrificed personal time and family obligations to deliver extraordinary financial results. Troy Bennett, my senior account executive, had worked through 3 consecutive holiday weekends to secure major client contract renewals, smashing his personal quarterly quota by 160%. Grant Miller had pulled off a complex multi-tier expansion agreement with our largest automotive client. Roy Jenkins and Neil Fletcher had spent months auditing compliance requirements to ensure our enterprise accounts remained locked into multi-year commitments. Dean Harper, Seth Albright, Wyatt Ross, and Nora Davis had executed flawless customer onboarding workflows, ensuring zero client churn across the entire fourth quarter. The bond within our bullpen was forged in shared hardship and mutual respect. When Nora Davis was dealing with her mother's medical emergency, the rest of the squad covered her accounts without asking for a dime of shared commission. When Seth Albright was working 48 straight hours to finalize a software rollout, Troy Bennett brought him hot meals and reviewed his contract terms line by line. We operated as a tight-knit family of professionals, taking pride in our craftsmanship in an environment increasingly dominated by shallow corporate metrics and superficial corporate slogans. Because our written compensation agreements explicitly stipulated performance-based financial bonuses for exceeding quarterly revenue targets, the mood within our department bullpen was electric throughout November and December. Troy Bennett was planning to put his earned bonus toward paying off his eldest daughter's university tuition. Nora Davis had already researched travel packages for a long-overdue family vacation that she had postponed twice to manage client software implementations. Seth Albright was preparing to place a down payment on his first family home, based on my signed compensation addendum renegotiated directly with Brad Pierce the previous autumn. My personal earned bonus payout stood at $88,400. I possessed hard documented evidence of this agreement, including signed PDF compensation structures, validated email chains, and digital Slack threads where Brad Pierce explicitly typed that our team's landmark numbers would be rewarded with proper financial compensation. The morning of the mandatory fourth quarter all-hands company meeting arrived on a crisp Friday. I dressed in a dark tailored wool suit and sat near the front row of the corporate auditorium, alongside my entire 8-person team. The atmosphere among the 300 attending employees was tense with anticipation. Word had leaked that the chief financial officer had approved an expanded executive budget, and everyone expected formal announcements regarding quarterly bonus disbursements. Brad Pierce strutted onto the elevated auditorium stage, carrying a wireless microphone and radiating the polished, artificial confidence of a television game show host. He proceeded through a 40-minute presentation filled with colorful bar graphs, soaring revenue curves, and soaring declarations about corporate synergy. Finally, Brad Pierce arrived at the final slide of his electronic presentation deck. Displayed across the 40-foot projection screen in giant, brightly colored comic font letters was the slogan, "Teamwork tastes better with pizza." Brad Pierce spread his arms wide, let out an enthusiastic laugh, and announced through the sound system that to celebrate our record-breaking $24 million fourth quarter, executive leadership was rewarding the entire workforce with a company-sponsored pizza party in the main cafeteria. He added with a cheerful wink that several large delivery boxes containing cheese, pepperoni, and gluten-free options had already been ordered for lunch. A heavy, suffocating silence settled across the auditorium. Nobody clapped. Nobody cheered. Troy Bennett stared blankly at the floorboards between his shoes. Nora Davis blinked repeatedly, her face pale with utter disbelief. Seth Albright sat motionless, as if he had been physically struck in the chest. Across the center aisle, Chief Operating Officer Howard Briggs and Human Resources Vice President Shelby Vance deliberately looked away, focusing intently on their mobile screens. I sat perfectly still in my front row seat, watching Brad Pierce smile down from the podium. In that single quiet moment, 14 years of corporate dedication and unblemished loyalty evaporated completely. Brad Pierce believed he had delivered a harmless cost-saving measure, entirely unaware that he had just handed me the moral and legal authority to dismantle his company. The Monday following the catastrophic all-hands meeting, I chose not to engage in emotional outbursts or impulsive hallway confrontations. Instead, I initiated formal administrative protocols. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I drafted a precise professional email addressed to Human Resources Vice President Shelby Vance and copied Chief Operating Officer Howard Briggs. My communication contained no hyperbole, anger, or sarcasm. I attached our verified fourth quarter revenue balance sheets, my signed executive compensation addendum, and a formal request for a private meeting to rectify the obvious discrepancy between our contractual bonus entitlements and the cafeteria pizza announcement. By 8:20 in the morning, an automated template response landed in my inbox from Shelby Vance. The message stated that my inquiry had been registered, but noted that discretionary incentive allocations remain subject to executive evaluation based on broader organizational equity guidelines. In short, corporate leadership was hiding behind vague administrative jargon to nullify written contracts. Over the next 48 hours, I attempted to schedule direct one-on-one calendar meetings with Howard Briggs. He systematically rejected every invitation, left my direct messaging channels unread, and instructed his administrative assistant to claim he was tied up in off-site strategic planning sessions. Throughout that tense week, I maintained absolute composure in front of my team. When Troy Bennett came into my office with a clenched jaw asking if corporate leadership was truly going to withhold our bonuses, I told him to focus on client deliverables and keep his head down. I could see the growing frustration in Nora Davis's eyes and the quiet anger in Seth Albright's demeanor, but I knew that reacting prematurely would destroy our leverage. I needed hard digital evidence of corporate wrongdoing before taking any decisive operational action. The true nature of their strategy became glaringly obvious on Wednesday afternoon. While standing near the cafeteria entrance waiting to fill my water container, I heard loud laughter coming from a corner dining table. Howard Briggs was sitting with two junior corporate analysts, eating salad and drinking expensive bottled water. Howard Briggs snorted loudly and remarked to the analysts that Vance Cooper and his sales team had developed absurd inflated egos. He stated that my division acted like overpaid cheerleaders who believed they invented revenue out of thin air, adding that enterprise sales representatives were easily replaceable in the current job market, and that corporate leadership had carried our department long enough. I did not step forward to confront him. I did not raise my voice or allow my facial expression to betray the storm brewing inside me. I turned quietly on my heel and walked back to my corner office, closing the heavy wooden door behind me. That single overheard conversation eliminated every lingering trace of hesitation. Brad Pierce and Howard Briggs were not merely trying to shave operating expenses. They were actively gaslighting my department, devaluing our contributions, and preparing to slowly absorb our enterprise client accounts into general corporate management so they could push me out without paying out earned commissions. Later that evening, after the office floor had emptied, I logged into the internal financial portal to review our department's commission ledgers. Upon entering the system, I discovered that access to our primary compensation spreadsheets had been locked behind a newly configured administrative firewall. Using my master administrative security credentials, I bypassed the security redirect and pulled up the raw fourth quarter financial ledger. What I found was blatant criminal wage manipulation. My earned contractual bonus of $88,400 had been manually edited down to $51,200 under an entry labeled clerical recalibration. Furthermore, the individual commission pools for Troy Bennett, Grant Miller, Roy Jenkins, Neil Fletcher, Dean Harper, Seth Albright, Wyatt Ross, and Nora Davis had been slashed by 40% across the board. They were openly pocketing $37,200 from my personal pay packet, while siphoning off over $100,000 from my team, all to artificially inflate fourth quarter operating margins and expand their own executive bonus pools. They assumed that because I was 54 years old, with a mortgage and a long tenure, I would quietly accept the indignity out of fear. They were catastrophically mistaken. When I arrived home that night, my wife Linda Cooper noticed my quiet demeanor. Linda Cooper is 51 years old, a pragmatic woman who has stood by me throughout my 30-year career in enterprise software. Sitting at our kitchen counter surrounded by late-night coffee cups, I laid out the entire situation. The record $24 million quarter, the insulting Comic Sans pizza slide, the overheard cheerleader comment from Howard Briggs, and the stolen $37,200. Linda Cooper listened intently, placed her hand over mine, and said with calm conviction that 14 years of loyalty meant nothing to men who lacked honor. She reminded me of how corporate executives routinely weaponize administrative red tape against older high earners, assuming senior directors will fold under pressure. She urged me to execute our departure cleanly, strategically, and ruthlessly, ensuring that my team was completely protected from corporate retaliation. Empowered by her unwavering support, I spent the midnight hours in my home office building, an unassailable digital archive. I launched a secure, encrypted virtual drive on my personal computer and began constructing a comprehensive digital dossier. I systematically extracted 14 years of digital records, verifying cryptographic hash signatures for every file. First, I backed up verified export files of every major contract closed under my tenure, complete with digital client signatures, implementation milestones, and verified revenue receipts. Second, I compiled years of Slack audio messages, written emails, and board meeting transcripts where Brad Pierce explicitly affirmed that my team's pipeline methodology was the lifeblood of the corporation. Third, I downloaded the original unedited compensation structures alongside digital audit logs, proving that the commission ledgers had been manually altered after the quarter had closed. I saved this entire data archive across 2 independent encrypted cloud vaults and a physical flash drive. Then, I opened an unread email thread from 6 months prior. The sender was Rebecca Holt, Senior Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Apex Vanguard Corporation, our largest direct market competitor. At the time, Rebecca Holt had offered me a lucrative executive role, which I had declined out of a misplaced sense of loyalty to my firm. I clicked reply and typed a short, concise message asking if Apex Vanguard Corporation was still interested in expanding its market share. 7 minutes later, my phone chimed with her reply. "We have been waiting for this call. We will take you and your entire 8-person division, guarantee complete operational autonomy, grant a 35% base salary increase for everyone, provide immediate signing bonuses, and match your full commission expectations. Let us meet tomorrow night." My meeting with Rebecca Holt took place inside a private reserved room at an upscale dining establishment on the outskirts of the financial district. Joining Rebecca Holt was Apex Vanguard's chief legal counsel, a sharp, razor-witted attorney named Arthur Vance, who specialized in corporate employment defense. Over the course of a 2-hour dinner, Rebecca Holt formally presented binding employment contracts for myself and all 8 members of my sales division. Apex Vanguard Corporation was prepared to deploy massive resources to absorb our team, guaranteeing dedicated enterprise territory rights, full remote working flexibility, and legally binding commission structures secured within third-party escrow accounts. However, before executing any agreements, I insisted on thorough legal verification to ensure that our exit would leave my former company completely powerless to pursue legal retaliation. The following morning, I met with my personal employment attorney, Mr. Halloway, a veteran litigator with 30 years of high-stakes corporate experience. We spent 4 hours inside his downtown office, meticulously reviewing my employment contract, company bylaws, and statutory employment codes. Mr. Halloway quickly identified 3 massive legal vulnerabilities in my former employer's operational structure, transforming our planned resignation into an airtight corporate trap. The first and most devastating vulnerability involved intellectual property rights under federal law. 8 years prior to joining my current employer, while running my own private consulting firm, I had authored and registered a proprietary algorithmic CRM lead scoring module and automated pipeline predictive engine under Title 17 of the United States Code, Section 106, alongside Title 35 of the United States Code, Section 271. When I accepted the position of Enterprise Sales Director 14 years ago, I granted the company a conditional revocable license to utilize my software infrastructure solely for the duration of my active employment. The company had built its entire $24 million sales operations around my proprietary software without ever executing an explicit intellectual property buyout. Mr. Holloway confirmed that the moment my employment terminated, that software license automatically revoked. If the company continued using my pipeline algorithms after my departure, they would face immediate federal copyright and patent infringement, lawsuits carrying severe statutory damages, and court-ordered injunctions that would freeze their sales operations overnight. The second legal lever pertained to statutory wage theft under federal labor law. Under the Fair Labor Standards Act, codified under Title 29 of the United States Code. Section 206, alongside state labor codes prohibiting unlawful commission deductions, arbitrarily altering earned financial compensation ledgers under the guise of clerical recalibration, constituted illegal wage theft. Furthermore, under Delaware General Corporation Law Section 141 and the Restatement Second of Agency Section 387, corporate officers owe an unyielding fiduciary duty of loyalty and honesty to the enterprise. By deliberately falsifying internal commission records to suppress employee compensation and artificially pad fourth quarter corporate earnings figures for executive bonus calculations, Brad Pierce and Howard Briggs had committed a direct breach of fiduciary duty and illegal dissipation of corporate assets. Mr. Holloway carefully explained that this breach of fiduciary duty created personal civil liability for Brad Pierce and Howard Briggs, meaning they could not hide behind corporate shell protections if sued by shareholders or defrauded employees. Statutory damages under federal wage protection provisions would entitle my team to double liquidated damages for all withheld funds. Furthermore, Rebecca Holt informed me that Apex Vanguard's executive board had held a late-night emergency session and voted unanimously to fund all legal expenses necessary to defend my team against any frivolous lawsuits filed by my former firm. Finally, Mr. Holloway evaluated the non-compete covenants embedded within our employment agreements. He confirmed that, under recent federal regulatory updates and state labor rulings, non-compete restrictions were legally unenforceable when an employer engaged in constructive discharge or material breach of contract through wage theft. Moreover, the covenant explicitly permitted former employees to service clients who initiated contact independently due to pre-existing professional relationships. Because our primary enterprise clients maintained personal trust directly with me and my reps rather than with Brad Pierce or Howard Briggs, those clients were fully legally entitled to transfer their accounts to Apex Vanguard Corporation without breaching any contractual covenants. Mr. Holloway handed back the documents with a victorious grin, confirming that our position was legally bulletproof and that my former employer faced total operational exposure. On Thursday evening, 24 hours before our scheduled departure, I organized an off-the-record dinner at an exclusive steakhouse downtown. I instructed my team members to leave their corporate devices in their vehicles. Attending the dinner were all 8 members of my division: Troy Bennett, Grant Miller, Roy Jenkins, Neil Fletcher, Dean Harper, Seth Albright, Wyatt Ross, and Nora Davis. We sat in a private dining room behind closed doors, surrounded by dark mahogany walls and soft ambient lighting. After the main steaks were served, I laid out the stark, unvarnished truth. I placed a portable audio speaker on the dining table and played the recorded audio file of Howard Briggs sneering to junior analysts that our team members were overpaid cheerleaders who were easily replaceable. I handed around printed copies of the encrypted audit ledgers, showing in bright red ink how their individual commission pools had been covertly slashed by 40% to finance executive bonuses. I explained how Brad Pierce was preparing to install a junior corporate handler named Jackson to shadow our daily operations and systematically siphon off our key account contacts. The reaction in the room was immediate and unanimous. Indignation gave way to cold, strategic resolve. Troy Bennett, whose eldest daughter was entering her freshman year at college, slammed his glass onto the table and declared into the quiet room that he refused to spend another single day enriching executives who viewed honest hard work with utter contempt. Nora Davis, who had sacrificed her family vacation to close the healthcare software deal, stated that her loyalty to the firm ended the moment they tampered with her family's financial security. Seth Albright recounted how he had worked through Thanksgiving night to fix a server integration issue for an enterprise client, only to have Howard Briggs question his overtime expenses the following week. Grant Miller, Roy Jenkins, Neil Fletcher, Dean Harper, and Wyatt Ross each voiced their absolute readiness to take action, recounting months of subtle disrespect and shifting goalposts from corporate management. I then pulled out the binding offer documents from Apex Vanguard Corporation. I presented each rep with an individualized contract featuring a 35% base salary increase, a substantial upfront signing bonus, full remote working autonomy, and comprehensive legal indemnification from Apex Vanguard's legal department. Without a single moment of hesitation, all 8 team members signed their new employment agreements on the spot, clinking their glasses together in quiet triumph. We then executed the final operational preparations with military discipline. I had drafted 8 individual resignation letters, each constructed with crisp, professional language stating that the employee was resigning from their position effective. Immediately at 10 o'clock on Friday morning, we configured an automated dispatch system, using encrypted scheduling software to transmit these resignation notices sequentially to human resources and Brad Pierce at 3-minute intervals following my live announcement. Additionally, I finalized pre-written client transition letters to be dispatched to our major enterprise account contacts 30 minutes after our walkout. These letters informed our clients of our department's transition to Apex Vanguard Corporation and provided direct personal contact numbers to ensure uninterrupted service management. Later that night, I returned to the empty corporate headquarters under the pretense of retrieving personal documents. The office floor was dark, empty, and silent. I systematically packed my desk, taking my framed family photos, private notebooks, and the encrypted drive containing my proprietary software algorithms. I placed my company-issued laptop in the exact center of my desk, executed a secure factory data wipe to purge local temporary files in full compliance with corporate IT protocols, and attached a simple printed note to the monitor screen. Logged out permanently. I walked out to my car feeling a quiet, profound sense of liberation. The trap was set, and the execution would be flawless. Friday morning arrived. The mandatory fourth quarter all-hands meeting was convened in the main corporate auditorium and broadcast live to regional satellite offices across the country. Brad Pierce took the stage at 9:30 in the morning, practically glowing with self-congratulatory pride. Wearing an expensive custom suit, he walked across the stage, presenting colorful slides that highlighted our record-breaking $24 million fourth quarter revenue. He spent 20 minutes praising his own strategic leadership, taking full personal credit for navigating industry challenges and driving corporate expansion. He repeatedly emphasized that true organizational success was rooted in shared corporate values rather than individual financial gain. At 9:58 in the morning, Brad Pierce clicked to his final presentation slide and invited me to step up to the stage to deliver a 5-minute departmental debrief. As polite applause echoed through the auditorium, I stood up from my front row seat, buttoned my wool suit jacket, and walked calmly up the wooden stairs to the main stage. I took the wireless microphone from Brad Pierce, nodded once toward the audience of 300 employees, and looked directly at Brad Pierce and Howard Briggs sitting in the front executive row. I began my address with a calm, measured voice, expressing deep, genuine gratitude to the 8 members of my sales division for their extraordinary discipline, night shifts, and unyielding commitment to closing $24 million in enterprise revenue. Then, my posture straightened and my voice took on a sharp, razor-like clarity that commanded absolute silence across the room. I stated directly into the microphone that authentic business leadership requires mutual respect and uncompromising contractual integrity, both of which had been completely abandoned by the current executive administration. I revealed to the entire company that exactly 5 minutes prior, I had submitted my formal written resignation as Enterprise Sales Director, effective immediately. A shockwave of gasps and murmurings swept through the auditorium. Brad Pierce's fake smile instantly froze. I continued without interruption, informing the room that all 8 core members of my sales division, Troy Bennett, Grant Miller, Roy Jenkins, Neil Fletcher, Dean Harper, Seth Albright, Wyatt Ross, and Nora Davis, had also submitted their formal resignations simultaneously. As of 10 o'clock that morning, our entire division had accepted senior executive positions at Apex Vanguard Corporation. Furthermore, I announced that, because our primary enterprise client relationships and proprietary lead scoring software were legally owned and controlled by our division, the $15,800,000 in active quarterly renewal contracts would be transitioning with us to our new firm. I looked Brad Pierce dead in the eye and delivered my final words. Your cheap pizza party just cost this company $24 million. I set the microphone neatly down on the podium table, turned around, and walked down the center aisle of the auditorium. Pure pandemonium erupted behind me. Employees sat frozen in shock, while mid-level managers whispered frantically. Howard Briggs scrambled out of his seat and sprinted toward the executive elevators, while Shelby Vance frantically pulled out her mobile phone as automated resignation notifications flooded her inbox every 3 minutes. Within 3 hours, the company's board of directors convened an emergency session, leading to the immediate firing of Chief Operating Officer Howard Briggs and the launch of a forensic financial investigation into Brad Pierce's executive misconduct. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, several major enterprise client representatives had already issued formal notices, terminating their service contracts with my former company, citing breach of trust and leadership instability. The financial news blogs picked up the story by late afternoon, highlighting the catastrophic failure of executive compensation policies. Shares of the firm dipped sharply after market close as industry analysts questioned the company's ability to maintain its enterprise software accounts without my specialized division. By Monday morning, my entire 8-person team was comfortably established in our new executive suite at Apex Vanguard Corporation, enjoying true profit-sharing structures, 35% salary increases, and absolute professional respect. Walking through the glass doors of Apex Vanguard, I looked at Troy Bennett, Nora Davis, Seth Albright, and the rest of my team as they unpacked their new equipment and settled into their corner offices. Standing beside my new wooden desk, looking out over the city skyline, I posted a quiet update on social media featuring a single photograph of my morning coffee. Brad Pierce was left standing in an empty abandoned bullpen beside 8 boxes of cold untouched pizza, learning the ultimate lesson that true corporate power is built on integrity, equity, and respect, not hollow deception.